So I will just take over and welcome everybody. And as I just said, we are recording the session. And right now I have 9 people on the screen. In a moment, I will go to the speaker's view so that that is what we're going to record. Actually, I'm going to do that right now, I think, if I can remember where to do that. Yeah. And let me see here. So Artem, would be great if you could turn off your phone, I think, your microphone. I have to see, now I have to do everything. So let's see how we can do this. If I'm doing speaker view now, you're not going to see
on
me.
the right corner. You have
Yeah, but I got a black screen when I turned it on. So now we'll have a recording with 9 people in it. But that looks like everybody has friends, so that's a good thing. So I'm going to be speaking for the first 10 to 15 minutes, and then I hope we can have a discussion afterwards, so that it becomes a collective effort, and that you can get some answers to whatever questions you have. My name is Lene Rachel Andersen. For those of you who don't know me, I am an author, a philosopher, and I live in Copenhagen. And I have written 15 books and 14 books in Danish and 4 books in English, and all of them are one way or the other about how we can develop and protect our democracies, liberal democracies, in the globalization, technological development, and with the changes to the environment that we're seeing due to climate change, and also the overall environmental challenges that we're having. So the book that brought us here, I'm just going to reach out, is the Nordic Secret, and some of you have it. And then I've written some shorter books about Bildung, which is the topic of today's meeting. And I have promised you that I will talk about what is Bildung and why do we need it in Armenia. And what is Bildung is sort of the long answer, or it takes longer to explain. Why do you need it in Armenia? Well, you need it for the exact same reason as all other countries or functioning societies. We need Bildung throughout the population in order for everybody to thrive, in order for us to have a functioning society, in order for people to take responsibility, and in order for people to find life meaningful and to be able to contribute as citizens. And so what is this Bildung thing, and what is that sort of magical bullet that will fix everything in society? And it's 2 approaches or 2 kinds of understanding or knowledge, and it's taken me a while to reach this conclusion. There are many older explanations. I mean, the philosophers that I refer to in the Nordic Secret is Schiller and Herder and Fichte and Goethe and all these old Germans. And then there's some newer philosophers as well. But the simple explanation that I've reached now is that it's, as I said, 2 kinds of knowledge. And one kind of knowledge is the knowledge that is rather easy to transfer from one person to the next. So whatever you can teach somebody else, or somebody else can teach you. And that can be math or science, or it can be a language. It can be how to fix a bicycle, or when you go online and want to buy, I don't know, a plane ticket, or sign up for something online. You can teach that to others. And this stuff that we can teach each other, we can broaden our horizon. So we can call it the horizontal kind of knowledge, and we can expand our knowledge in all kinds of directions with this kind of easy transferable knowledge. I mean, some of the knowledge is hard to transfer. There's some math that I will never understand, so it'll be hard to transfer it to my mind, but it can be taught. The other kind of knowledge is harder to describe, and we can call it the vertical kind of knowledge, or the vertical kind of understanding, which is our emotional and moral development. And this is really the part of Bildung that the German Bildung philosophers 250 years ago were describing and exploring and focusing on. And so the vertical development has some depth, It can be emotional depth. It can be depth into our cultural fabric, our cultural heritage, our understanding of where we're coming from. It can be emotional depth with relation to how we relate to other people. And then the moral aspirations, how high do we aim, is the other aspect. And for how much are we willing or capable of taking responsibility? And so there's the emotional depth and the moral height, so to speak. And when we bring this together, we have a full inner life and human being. And part of the emotional development, of course, also comes from struggling with this knowledge and trying to figure out what society is like around you. And I'm going to try and share the screen here, which is always so exciting, particularly when it's being recorded, because you never know how well it works. But let's see if I can do it here. Yes. Can you see this now? Good. Thank you. So I'm calling it the Bildung rose, and this is a model depicting the horizontal knowledge that we can have and the many kinds of knowledge that we need in order to understand our society. And really what it is a model of society. I'm going to see if I can move it down. Yes, I can. So this is has 7 domains, so to speak: production, technology, aesthetics. So that can be the arts, it can be pop music, it can be literature, power, political power structures, science, narratives. That can be religion, it can be history, it can be political ideology, but that's where our moral values of society are embedded in either storytelling or other ways of expressing ourselves. And then there's ethics, which I define as the difference between morals and ethics is that moral values, or the morals, are the guidelines for good behavior in familiar situations, whereas ethics is the guidelines for our behavior in unfamiliar situations. I think I can actually make this even more of a, let's see here. Yes, I can make it a full screen. So, and so this is really a model of society, but the reason why I call it the Bildung rose and not the society rose is because in order for us to function as individuals in society, we have to know some of all of this. Otherwise, we cannot, if we don't know about production and technology, we cannot provide for ourselves in the economy. We can't find a job. If we don't understand the power structure in society, we cannot take responsibility as citizens. If we don't understand science, we become prone to conspiracy theories, for instance, or we cannot explore new knowledge in society. So we need some basic understanding of what is science and what is not, and what is scientific knowledge and what is not. And then the aesthetics, that's all the entertainment and the arts that make life meaningful. That's where we develop new symbolic worlds in order for us to be able to communicate with each other. And then we have the narrative and the ethics, and we can't have a functioning society without some moral values and some ethics that can guide us. And the top and the bottom of this Bildung rose has played different roles in our communities, in our society. And so the top layer here is what's physically possible here and now. And the middle layer is what might be possible. And we need to have conversations about that. And then the bottom here is what ought to be. And one of the problems that we're facing, I suppose, in all societies today is that we've spent so much time and effort and money on what is physically possible here and now. That's where the commercial world is thriving. We've spent very little time on what might be possible, definitely from a scientific perspective, and also from a political perspective, and also from an aesthetic perspective. And then what ought to be, I don't know about Armenia, but in Denmark, we barely have any moral discussions about what is the good society, what are the ethical principles that should be behind, for instance, the technological development and the production we have. The closest that we get to this is a debate about the environment and a transformation into a green economy, whenever people speak about it in more than just general economic and technical terms. So so this is this is the Bildung rose, and it's an image of what kind of horizontal, if you imagine that we flip this down, and change. Let me see if I can stop sharing here, like that. Oh man, got a weird message. There we are. So so this is my take on the horizontal knowledge, where we need to have all this knowledge that goes out in many different directions. And if we have the power in the middle of society, or in the middle of the Bildung rose when it comes to society, in our individual lives, the power in the middle is that vertical development, the power over ourselves. How well do I know my emotions? How well can I handle my emotions? And how much do I let myself be provoked or, brought to despair by other people? And if I'm just going to add one more thing to the vertical development, the German philosopher Friedrich Schiller talked about that there are three kinds of people, and that is how he defined Bildung. So there are three kinds of people, and the first kind of person, we can imagine there's a little person here, is the what he called the physical person, or the emotional person, who is in the throes of his or her emotions and who cannot transcend them. So whatever he or she does is based on his or her emotions, without any major reflection about why he or she does whatever she does. It just feels right or feels wrong. But you can transcend these emotions by internalizing the norms, and that would be the moral norms and the narratives of society, and make them your own. And once you have internalized them, they are more or less in control of what you do. You'll always look to other people and see if whatever they're doing must be the right thing. And so what Schiller says is that neither the emotional person nor he calls it the rational person, or the person of reason, is free, because the first person here is controlled by his emotions, and the second person here is controlled by other people's expectations. The only person who's free is the third kind of person, and he calls him or her the free moral person. And the reason why it's a free person who can make up his own mind is because he has reconnected with his own emotions, and he knows the moral values of society and the principles behind it, so he can actually compare the emotions and the moral norms of others and make up his own mind. And one of the interesting things is that he connects this to political freedom and says this is the only person who can handle political freedom, because he wrote this in the aftermath of the French Revolution. And at first, the French Revolution brought so much hope to people in Europe. It was like, finally, there was a dictator who fell. And so, yes, political freedom. And then came the bloodbath, and people were appalled. It was like, how come they could not handle political freedom? And that's where Schiller said, well, because the first kind of person is, once they have the riot, they just go rioting, and then you can't stop them, and they're just like, whoa. And then you got the rational people, the people of reason in the middle here, and they're just going to do like these people because they're showing the biggest passion, so they're going to just follow them. And the only people who can really handle political freedom and stop the bloodbath and say, no, we definitely need to, get rid of the tyrant, but we can't just keep killing people. That would be the free moral person. So so this development is the emotional development. This is Bildung, and this would be the vertical development that you can have. So the going from just having your emotions to expanding to your to the rationale of society, and then expanding to actually being able to handle yourself and have a critical thinking and a critical reflection upon how am I acting, how am I using all the knowledge that I have and interacting with other people. So that would be Bildung. So yep, that is my 50 cents. And I would love to hear your reflections, take questions, have a discussion.
I want to ask Tatevik Aletsyan. We prepare some questions before, so if it's possible, please, Tatevik.
Okay, So, question for me, and then if there is anyone who would like any support with the language, I would be glad to translate. That's a little bit of support, hopefully. So the first question would be, you mentioned these three types of people, and it's I assume some type of modeling. Um,
Mm,
so basically, if you first of all kind of identify what kind of people are the majority of your society, probably this would help to understand how to transform. And my question would be, how Bildung or probably your experience shows, how does this vertical transformation take place, where to start and how to proceed?
right. So, I mean, what Friedrich Schiller says is that aesthetics can do this. So the arts, literature, and music. So if you're the emotional person and you experience calming aesthetics, so that would be soothing music, you learn to align your emotions with your surroundings. And then when you've become the person of reason, we need some aesthetics that can wake you up and shake you up and get you going and feel perhaps some anger and frustration with things that are morally wrong, and so you can become the free moral person. But this is a lifelong uh, development, or at least it's, if you look at modern developmental psychology and see the parallel there, the emotional person would be the child, the big child even, and then the person who internalizes the norm of society would typically be the teenager and young adult. And you can live your entire adult life with having internalized the emotions or the moral values of society. You can also live your entire adult life just being, in the throes of your emotions, and you can even become, I would say, the president of the United States. um, but you can evolve and then learn to take moral responsibility, and then you can also become the president of the United States, and many other things. How big a percentage you have of these people in each society, um, I don't know. And I think that we are today, with all the education that we have access to, and all the media, all the popular pop culture, entertainment, and so forth. I think we have collectively, as a species and a civilization, moved more people from the emotional state into at least into the rational state. And one of the reasons why I think that is because if you look at the average action movie, which seems to be very popular among young adults, you have typically a hero who solves a conflict out there in the real world. And most of these mainstream movies end up with the hero uh, winning over the bad guys, so to speak. So the uh, morality wins until Quentin Tarantino came around and screwed up everything with his "Hey, it's fun to kill people" movies. Um, but um, the general morale of the mainstream action movie or even romantic comedy would be that you end up in a monogamous relationship with the bad people dead and the good people alive. And we keep paying movie ticket after movie ticket to see that narrative told over and over again. And people identify with the hero, usually, not with the villain in these movies. So I think we have managed in our civilization to mass move young adults into becoming these rational people. I'm not saying it works all the time, but I think it works a lot better today than it did 200 years ago. And then, of course, comes the big, thing. How many people reach the point in their life where they go, maybe what everybody else does is not the right thing for me, after having internalized the norms of society. I mean, just being the emotional person who thinks what everybody else does not count for me. That's not the same as having been through that moral development and emotional development where you do make the norms of society your own and then step out of it again. And I would say I I I think that most people who have had like more than a couple of romantic relationships will have had a huge chance of both being with the person in the throes of their emotions, who is like the worst partner you can ever be with, and then having a relationship to somebody who has internalized the norms of society and only does what everybody else expects, and where at some point you will be incredibly bored by that relationship. And then you've been with a person who has developed into coming up with or being an independent, autonomous individual who has who can be trusted, who has internalized the norms of society, but who also has their own emotions and have their own agendas and interests, and who is engaged in, hobby, in social networks, in, all kinds of things, and actually, as we say, has a life. And so this Bildung process is is something that goes on, not just in childhood but also in adulthood. And I would also say, I mean, it's also you can be the emotional person in some circumstances and social networks or relationships, like with your parents, for instance. And then you can be the rational person, a person of reason in other places, maybe at the workplace, because you're simply stuck in a role that you cannot break out of. And then you can be the autonomous, free person when you're a citizen, or when you're among your friends, or maybe that's what you can do when you're in the workplace, but you don't have the moral courage to do it when you're among your friends, because maybe you're afraid of losing your friends. It might also be that it's in the family that you have this sense of inner moral compass, and where you have the freedom and the confidence that whatever you do and whatever you say, your family will still love you and not kick you out. So um, it's more complex than Schiller makes it sound like, and it's also more complex than much of developmental psychology describes it as today. But I think um, there is, I mean, if there is a progression in our development, and once you have made some of these progressions, or transcended some of your own emotions and transcended the expectations of others, you cannot go back. Then you get really frustrated. It's like if you have moved out from your parents and learned to live, getting used to live on your own or with your own family, and then for some reason you have to move back in with your parents. I mean, that's not going to work for you. Then you're going to be, bitter and frustrated, and trying to fit into a framework that's too small. So that is also part of the Bildung process. I mean, you open up, but then it's really hard if you have to, go back into sort of a previous life situation.
Um, Thanks a lot. Probably one more quick question for clarification, and I'll
Mhm.
probably let others also share their thoughts. When you're talking about norms of society or social norms, it would be probably helpful to define those, because at times I would believe that some of there might be disagreement with these norms, or these norms may become obsolete or not even qualifying to be in agreement with human norms or human rights and so on and so forth.
Right. And so, and this is where it's important that you develop to become the free moral person, because moral norms are always up for negotiation in society. But in some places, that negotiation may end up in, somebody killing you. Could be a patriarch, can be secret police, can be tons of stuff. So depending on society, you have more or less freedom to have this conversation about what are the moral values, what are the shared norms that we have here. And of course, the more traditional or pre-modern society is, the harder it is to step outside of these norms. And in the modern, particularly in the postmodern society, where we have more or less given up on defining shared norms, you can do almost whatever you want. As long as it's not against the legislation, you can always find somebody else who thinks and, behaves the same way as you do, and make your own subculture or local community of sorts. And this is posing, I mean, both these extremes are posing challenges to society as a whole, and particularly to democracy, because we do need to have some sort of at least shared references and shared language, and accepting of at least of the legislation in order for society to work. And part of this Bildung development is also that you, in this process, becomes more tolerant. And there is a huge difference between having tolerant norms, but actually being intolerant. So you could have these, let's say, agitated extremists on behalf of, say, gay and lesbian and trans and queer rights, but where people simply cannot handle emotionally that there is a conservative person who happens to disagree, and where, you know, people are canceled from their lecturing at universities or participating in conversations and so forth. So that is actually an intolerant, emotionally controlled reaction to some viewpoints that people don't like, even though they themselves represent some very tolerant norms about, say, you know, LGBTQ and so forth. And then you can have the maybe very either conservative or progressive person who stands very firmly on an extreme point of view, can be conservative, can be liberal, whatever, but who actually has the tolerance, the emotional maturity, the Bildung, to say, okay, I happen to be extremely conservative myself, but I'm perfectly happy with other people doing whatever it is they want to do in their life, and I'm willing to hear their viewpoint. I'm not going to shut them up just because they disagree with me. And that's actually tolerance. So you could absolutely imagine, let's say, a priest or a rabbi or an imam or somebody who represents one very strict norm or set or moral values, who is willing to listen to somebody who lives a very, from their perspective, sinful life, without condemning them and without, you know, shutting them up or saying you're not allowed to be here. And that would actually be tolerance. We're not used to seeing it like that, but that would be the emotionally mature person who's willing to, you know, accept and embrace that there are people who live in ways that I simply cannot imagine why anybody would live like that. But I can absolutely accept that they do that because that makes sense to them. And to reach that point, I mean, that is Bildung. It's emotional maturity. I mean, that's the vertical development where you can actually handle that there are people who do things that you would never do, and you, it's like live and let live. Yeah, so
Thanks a lot.
I would love to ask some question. What can you say about Bildung now, today? I mean, after this 150 years, and we got so many changes, and modernity and postmodernity, and now it's we're talking about metamodernity, and so such big changes. If Bildung also, if this idea also changed somehow or has some influence, or maybe opposite, maybe it have to be somehow some ideal, some.
yeah, so I would say, unfortunately, see, I have no idea what the situation is in Armenia, and I don't even know what it is in the rest of Europe. But my sense is that the educational systems, the people in education, used to have an understanding of Bildung. And because we have a long pedagogical tradition that describes this. There was also the Swiss pedagogue Pestalozzi. So people who have studied to become teachers and who have worked with this have had access to philosophers who wrote about this. And so this has been part of the conversation. And unfortunately, what has happened the past 20 to 30 years is that even in school systems that used to have a Bildung tradition, we have started focusing more and more on measurable, the horizontal kind of knowledge that can, because there you can measure, you can test people on the horizontal kind of knowledge. And the OECD and the PISA tests are testing the horizontal part. And now we have all these educational systems and countries that see themselves in a constant competition for winning the PISA test, which is, I would say, ruining our school system. So we're on a wrong path, and that's one of the reasons why we are working with Bildung, both at Nordic Bildung, the think tank, and the European Bildung Network, and in other contexts, because we need to change this. We need to have Bildung, and we need to create spaces for this development and for exploring the arts and meeting each other and talking like we're doing now and challenging viewpoints, so that we get some of these pushbacks that offend us a little bit or a lot, and forces us to think about, that was an awful comment that person said, but could there be truth in it? Or why would this person think like that? It seems to be a reasonable person in, many other aspects of life. Why would somebody say something like that? Or what is it that I don't understand that may mean that I misunderstand what their intention was? And so these conversations with people with whom we disagree are really crucial in order for us to grow as people, and in order to create strong communities and societies. Lisa has raised her hand.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Hello, and thank you for this opportunity and the organizers also. So basically, the ideas and the theoretical part is kind of more or less clear to me and sounds really exciting. But when it comes to, especially when you talk about emotional intelligence, let's say, or emotional awareness, I'm quite interested about the practical implementation, or what are the approaches? Is it like psychoanalysis, or what is it? How does it work?
Yeah, see that we're Meta and I, my colleague who's also here, we're struggling with that, because there are a number of ways of doing it, but there is no quick fix. And it's like, how do you get life experience without living life? Because this is really what it is about. I mean, it's speeding up life experience so that you can go out into the world and be a wiser person. And here's where literature can really help us. And I would say literature more than any of the other arts. In general, the aesthetics, the arts, can challenge the way that we perceive the world already, and make us struggle with what it is this art is doing to us, or struggle with the understanding, or struggle with other people's understanding of the same piece of art. So discussions, conversations are a crucial part. But what literature can do is that you can read a novel and identify with a person who is fundamentally different from you and living under fundamentally different circumstances. And once you start identifying with that person and that character, if it's well written and if you really, engage with it, you would, at least I think, automatically start thinking, what would I have done in a similar situation? How would I have reacted if I was living under these circumstances or put in this situation? And the reason why literature is stronger as a Bildung tool than the other art forms is that, and there are, there's neuroscience and brain scans to back this up, is that we have some mirror neurons in our brains, which means that as I'm speaking now and you see my face, you see my hand movement and so forth, your brain is actually mimicking what I'm doing. So if I were to stick my tongue out, I'm not going to do that. But if I were, you would all feel encouraged to stick your tongue out. Or if I start, yawning, I kind of feel an urge to start yawning too. I can do lectures where people yawn all the time. But so there are mirror neurons in your brains triggering this, what you see another body is doing. And when you read a novel, the same process starts in your brain. And so when if you read a crime story and you identify with the possible victim and she's walking in, stilettos down a dark alley in the middle of the night, and you know that there's no other people within, how many 100 meters away, and you know that there's a horrible killer loose in the city, your heart rate goes up. And so we identify with these characters, and reading is much more of an active process than watching a movie. So you have to create your own imagery. And so you're actually more involved when you're reading a novel and creating this, a whole inner cinematic experience than when you're actually watching a movie in the cinema. And also what typically happens with a novel is that you read, I don't know, maybe half an hour now, and then 2 hours a couple of days later, then you think about it, and then 3 weeks later you read for 3 hours, and then you spend the whole weekend reading, and then you wait for another 2 weeks. And so in the meantime, from time to time, you go back to thinking, wonder what happens next to the character. And then it becomes an active process that is also much longer than if you just watch a movie and it's 2 hours and you're out of there. So literature is one of the paths. And then the discussion, the conversation, and realizing that other people saw something different in this than you did. And for the conversations, of course, if you want to make a study group or like a study circle, it might be better with shorter texts. I was actually in a study circle with the Great Books Project in the United States, where we were reading the hill that we climb. Was that the name of it? The poem from the inauguration in the United States, Biden's inauguration. And so I think we were like 20 people and split up into 2 or 3 groups discussing this poem. And the whole point was the, very different experiences that we had from this poem. So that is part of the Bildung process, but it's it takes effort. You really, you have to bring people together to do it, but it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think an important part is that people, like we do now, get to ask questions and bring in their voice to the to the conversation.
Thank you. Can I ask another short question?
Sure,
if I may?
absolutely. Nobody else has raised their hand, so it's,
Okay.
until they do, we will just keep talking.
Okay, thanks. So the philosophers you mentioned, I believe they belong to more or less romantic tradition.
Yes.
And also this idea of learning through literature, especially through identifying with the protagonist, is also, I think, kind of relevant to that time, or at least comes from there, kind of. But then I have a kind of another question, which is about what do we do with our demons, let's say, because unfortunately you were not that into the light mostly. We have our dark sides, so what to do with those, how to work through those, let's say.
Yeah, let me just also say, today, besides the literature, there is of course also computer games and some virtual reality experiences, but finding the right ones that are more than just shooting your opponents and will actually put you in moral and ethical dilemmas and give you Bildung. That would be, I don't know which ones would do that. I don't play myself, so that would actually be something worth exploring. But with regards to the demons and our darker sides, I think that is also that's also where we need conversations, so that we don't just struggle with our darker sides and inner dark, black holes that can be very, very deep on our own. And I think, again, literature and the arts can help us, because usually somebody else did experience the same demon or dark side at some point. And the experience that somebody actually understands or understood what I'm going through can be healing. But yes, we definitely also need to open up to other people and allow ourselves to explore, you know, our darker side together with others. But the question is, how do you find the right person with whom to do that? So now, Tatevik raised her hand.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I did. Hey, hello, and thank you, Lene, so much for the presentation. I couldn't agree more with the entire theory you were discussing here, actually. This was something that really bothered me for quite some time, and this is what I dedicate myself as well. I'm not a philosopher, but then I write as well, more of a bill writing though, but still, this is the theme I'm exploring as well. So a few things are really interesting to me. Here, when we talk about, you know, people who really like fit in because they base their actions upon their thinking process and they know what the rules are, and the people who act out of their own feelings because every now and then I think things are not really right. When you talk about it, what really strikes me is the terminology, actually, and this is something I've noticed in other literature as well. When people say, how did you put it, emotional and rational people, this is really confusing to me because
I know, I'm sorry. Yes,
emotions are so deeply rational if you think about them. I mean, when you think something is wrong, it's because there is a, you know, there's a framework under it that makes you understand this will not work out for you as a person or a society as a whole, right? Because both feelings and our thought processes are given to us, let's say, to survive, right? Either as a person, one, or as a society, right? That's where the morale comes in, right? We don't do stuff to others which we don't want to be done to ourselves because it's rational, because it puts us in the survival mode of helping each other. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to go further because I think that point is clear. So this is one thing I wanted to ask. And the second thing was, now, when you're talking about, you know, like literature affecting people's, as you put it, vertical, what's that, education,
development or
development, right? Yeah. And you know, or any activity like this, that the platform we are developing, etc. Are there any tools to measure the impact? This is like, seriously, because you know, I've been writing like for 7 years, and I'm thinking like, am I doing this to sound cool because I'm a writer, or do I really change? Like, you wrote a book. What are the tools to measure how much impact it brought to your society, how much really you challenge some obsolete values, or you know, whatever feels wrong to you again, right? The collective unconscious that's happening. How much impact are you making just by doing this or that activity? Are there any rules for measuring them?
To take the last part first, I mean, so in modern developmental psychology, and particularly people who work in leadership development from a developmental psychology perspective, ego development perspective, and people who are working with the like the model of Robert Keegan, for instance, there are some ways of assessing how people approach the world and how well they understand themselves and their own emotions. But it's an interpretation, and it's almost like when I would compare that assessment to the way that you interpret a poem. So, I mean, if you read a poem and you try to figure out what did the poet, the author, want to say with this poem? Oh, so he used that word and not this word, or she, and oh, I see this reference to that thing, and oh, here's a word that we usually never use, but in this context, it refers back to that, other poem. And so the interpretation of how people understand the world and where they are in their emotional development is more or less the same kind of interpretation process, where you make an interview with a person, and then you transcribe the interview, and then you go looking for the ways in which the person expresses him or herself, and how he or she relates to his or her own emotions. And you can't really, you can't say, oh, there's a 4.5 score on self-understanding, and oh, here's only 3, and oh, there's a good point, so it's like that's 5 points. It doesn't work like that. It's an interpretation, and with all interpretation, it usually says as much about the interpreter as it does about the topic. So if I'm going to analyze that poem, whatever I bring into the analysis limits what I can find in the poem. And it's the same thing with analyzing people. If that's the kind of analyze you do, where you're actually analyzing what they're saying in order to estimate their personal development. And so there is I don't think there is a scoring measuring point when it comes to the individual. And of course, how much impact do you have, or how much can you influence your circumstances, your surroundings by your actions, your words, your literature, or even just your personal actions in your family? That's even tougher. And then there's the whole vocabulary that you brought up with the emotional person, the rational person, and the free moral person. If I were Friedrich Schiller, I would have used some other words. The words that I do use, though, are the politically correct ones. The words that he did, he wrote in the 1790s, and people were more frank in many circumstances back then. And so he also referred to, what was it? It was, one of the categories he called the barbarians. I'm not going to say anymore. And I have not quoted him on that one, because I don't want to, refer to any of my, fellow citizens or people in other places as barbarians. It's just not my style. I might an individual, from time to time, but I don't want to put it in a book. So yes, the wording is you can tell that this was from the 18th century. But you're absolutely right. Our emotions are in many respects very rational, and we cannot make a rational decision without our emotions. And there are people who have lost their emotional ability because of disease or whatever, trauma, and who simply cannot make up their mind afterwards. There are people who lose the ability to make up their mind simply because they can't feel anything. And even rationally, they can't think up an answer. And that just shows us how important the emotions are. So yes. Anybody else or more?
Thank you. No, I just wanted to thank you. And so frankly, when we think that, say, literature is changing the society, this is more of an intuitional approach. Are you saying that?
I absolutely think it is. One novel is probably not going to change society, but when you have a society where people read certain kinds of literature, or going from not reading to reading, and from not having public libraries to having public libraries, something changes. And if you have people who are over the course of, okay, so let's say you have a society where nobody has access to libraries and novels, and they go to school for 7 years, and then they start working, and so they can read a newspaper, but they don't routinely do it. That's one kind of society. At the other extreme, you have societies where everybody goes through high school, where there are public libraries, and where the average person reads at least one novel per year. Some of it, maybe pop, what any academic scholar would frown upon, but at least, people are reading and they're identifying with characters, and they're, keeping the reading machinery going in their brain. And some people read, 3 or 4 novels per year, and they read literature from other parts of the world, and they read literature where it's not the hero that the protagonist, the hero, the good person who wins, but the bad people win, and they don't catch the criminals, and it's ambiguous, and you don't actually at the end of the novel know who is the good people and who were the bad people. And you end up in more confusion, like reading Kafka, for instance. It's so frustrating. That's why he's a great author. It's like you feel horrible. Yay, great book. So that that when you do that from time to time and actually end up appreciating it, and if you have, say, 5 or 10% of the population who pursue that kind of experience from time to time, ruining a perfectly good weekend by reading Kafka, it does something to the culture, and it does something to what kind of conversations you can have in society. It doesn't mean that everybody participates or can participate, but it means that there is a critical mass of people who can raise different kinds of questions. And if these people are really smart, they make sure that everybody gets as much education as they can and learn to appreciate the arts and the aesthetics. And it doesn't have to be just novels. I also think of like folk music. I think of communal singing. Going to church, all kinds of cultural experiences where you get
psychotherapy and yoga, and
anything really, but where you meet with other people and do something that broadens your mind.
What I'm saying is that, of course, we all know this intuitively, but do we really know it? Like, is there any data behind it? Is there any statistic behind it? Like, do we what I'm saying is, like, when you dedicate your life to that, you want to make sure this is not just a delusion you are going after.
Another delusion. Yes, good point. It would be interesting just to yes, there is.
Okay.
But there is data that shows that the more for every year of education you give to a child, the GDP goes up by a certain percentage point compared to something else. It's been a year and a half since I looked at those numbers. So I bet that if you looked at countries, country by country or region by region, so like municipalities, not municipalities, but counties, and looked at the number of theaters, libraries, and movie theaters and universities per capita. So that would be like a fraction of sorts, but you could come up with that number. I bet that you would have a better economy, and you would have different it might actually affect, then you'd have to look at some different measures, because I'm thinking about crime, for instance. That would be one of the things that you would usually look at. Another thing that you might want to look at is the consumption of psychopharmaceuticals. So medication against anxiety and depression.
That might be even a better indicator, I think, because then crime will depend on the legislation of the country, which again may be unjust and unmoral. And
and you might have rural areas with absolutely no cultural institutions and no crime at all, whereas you would have inner cities with neighborhoods that are crime ridden and low education, and then other neighborhoods with financial crime and lots of culture institutions. So
Yeah.
crime might not be the best one, but anxiety and depression
That's a good one.
might work.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
And definitely economy.
Sure.
And it would be interesting to compare if you look at education, and you bring in that Bildung rows and see how much of a variety of education do you have here? Or, I mean, so if it's all economists or all engineers, what does the economy and the anxiety and the social infrastructure of that society look like, compared to if you have regions or cities with a broad variety of education and people with different kinds of education. But I have not seen any kind of statistics on that, but it would be really interesting to find out. Yes, Julia?
Thank you.
I ask if nobody have now Artyom, I already has question.
Oh yeah, thank you for the good points. Actually, there's three kinds of personality, like emotional and so on. I think that one of our problem is that not that we don't communicate, but many times we communicate wrong ways. But I have one point and question, which is about this Soviet time, when I heard from the old generations that they have been reading much, the novels and so on. Even Armenia in 1960s and 70s growing much in cultural and literature, in art, in all these levels. But unfortunately, after 1990, when we get independent, actually not only Armenia, but these post-Soviet countries, then suddenly we find out that the society is really, really, really very sick. And then how this can happen, the nation or nations have been reading much, very creative, even stand against this crazy Soviet system like Armenia in 1960s and 1988, especially. But then we feel like, it's like my generation, we feel like we are lost, And then I realized, it's just my opinion, that the problem was and still is that, of course, they have been reading much, that the basements of the developing the personality was empty, and there was nothing that they believe in. The only thing they followed, that was the ideology of communism, but nothing that they believe in. So don't you think that reading novels, of course, I think it's better to read but still, I'm a little afraid that, okay, let's motivate young generations to read and read and read. But what is the basement? What should be the beliefs about? And the values, of course,
Right.
that comes from these beliefs. So sorry, but as I understood, still even in Western countries, I cannot say whole West, but still I see the same problem. I think the new generations, they get much knowledge. Maybe you have very good education systems and so on, But but what if after 30 years, as it's happened to us, and then suddenly it's empty, the basement, the basic values that there should be, but it's empty. And then you will have the same problem like the other generations, they will feel like lost as we did.
I think we are in that situation. You're perfectly right, and that's why I think it's not just the reading, it's the combination of the reading and the conversation about it. And one of the things that you could not do under communism was meet and have the conversation. So and that's why I say that the moral values of society are constantly being negotiated. Even when that negotiation cannot take place, that is a kind of negotiation, because then the moral fabric falls apart. Because in order to have a moral fabric, you need to be able to meet around it. And so if we look at the traditional society, the pre-modern society, the church or whatever religion you belong to, I mean, the house of prayer and the priests defined what were the moral values, and you could not ask any questions. Then it was like you were heretic and they would kick you out or do something bad to you. But it was in a public space, and everybody had to go there and listen to it. And so the moral values of the Soviet Union were, I guess, speeches by Stalin over the radio, which you can't really call a strong moral fabric. And it was definitely, set up to fall apart as soon as the violence that kept it in place fell apart. So whether we have that conversation or not, moral values have to be negotiated in order to be there. So you're absolutely right. And it's one of the reasons why let me put it this way. I absolutely love meditation, but it's not going to solve the problems, because one of the problems with meditation is that people keep quiet. So it may be good for you as an individual. It may be a great thing to do together. There's a lot of quality to it, but it's not going to help you negotiate the moral fabric. And it's not going to expand your vocabulary. I mean, that's what happens in silence. So it's two different things. There's nothing bad about it, but it's not solving we need to talk about what is right or wrong, what is good or bad. How do we want this community to function? You can have the meditation and then talk about it afterwards, or then have the conversation about literature or about a spiritual teacher or about Buddhism or something like that. Excellent. And then of course you can go back and reflect upon it, and you can go into your own mind and figure out what do I think about it? How did I feel during that conversation? How do I relate to this? And get to know yourself. Excellent. But it's two different things. And what is important, I mean, what we're doing right now is I'm not asking any of you about your emotions, and you're not asking me about my emotions or how I feel about this. I'm feeling great, by the way, but that's not the conversation. What we are sharing here is a third thing that we all look at from the outside, and we're now exploring that together. I say more than you do, but we're looking at Bildung, and we're looking at literature, we're looking at history, we're looking at meaning making. And you're coming from one place, Med and I are coming from a different place. And we're having this conversation, and I'm learning a lot from this. I hope that you are too. And in that process, what opens up the conversation is that we're not looking into what goes on inside one particular other person. I'm not here to expose my own emotions. We're here to discuss something, and we all have emotions going on as we do that. And that is, forgot who was asking, it was Lisa, I think. How do we do this? And what is the actual method? And this is the method. This is where we look at something together. We can be 2 people looking at it. We can be 16 people looking at it, and explore it together and realize that, oh man, there was somebody who came up with this completely different view on this that I hadn't thought about. Why had I not thought about that? And so that is the Bildung process. And I think where we have school systems that allow children and young adults and adults to do this, we can speed up this process where we have school systems that just say, this is the result and you better remember it correctly. Then we do not have Bildung. And I know that that was what they did in the Soviet Union. Helen?
Hello, can you
Yeah,
hear
hi.
me?
Yes.
Hello, thank you much for this discussion. It was really nice to meet you and to learn more about Bildung. And I have a question. Do you have any experience of dealing with people, with society that doesn't want to change, that doesn't want to develop, doesn't want to grow, let's say, because there are many people in our society that they just like the way they live, the life that they live. So they do not want to change and they resist. That is the most difficult part, maybe, in implementing Bildung in our society, because a lot of people will not let that enter maybe their children's life, their relatives' lives, and so on. Because I think that it's very important to implement Bildung in schools and universities to make it more popular. Because if we will discuss here the principles of it, the concept of Bildung, but then it will not spread all around the society, then we will not be able to change a lot. And I don't know how much you know, how familiar you are with Armenian people, and because if you just talk to other side of our society, you will find that people, they do not accept anything new. If you watch our TV series like those soap operas, or hear to music that you can see on TV, you can watch, you can listen, that you will understand that Bildung is has very low chances to find a place here. But I really see that nowadays, after this war, after during this depression, that is what exactly people need, to understand that they need to grow, they need to think critically. But I see no ways to let's say, make people to understand it, at least to read a little about Bildung, because nowadays generations, this young generation, they don't like reading that much. They want just to spend time in TikTok. Maybe we need to master those social networks to enter their minds. But I don't know how else can we influence, like to help them at least hear about it, to think about it, and to discuss. That's all.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, you can't, if you can't change other people by trying to change other people. But what you can do is do something cool and interesting that might, get them curious. And so that is where we can also use the arts, or the literature, or storytelling, or folk music, or organize. COVID. I don't know what the exact COVID situation is, but find something that people already like, that they do want, and trick them to joining the event. And then it can be story night at the local pub, or a poetry slam at the, with your, get some young people to read you must have some traditional poetry, or, poems or songs or something, and make the folk singing night at the local pub, whatever, and pick 3 of them, and then build up a question around it and say, which of these 3 songs did you like the most and why? Because then you have the conversation about, so why did I like this one song better than the other one? I have no idea what your folk songs are like, but there's probably something about, broken hearts and brave men and chaste women and young love. There's probably also one about a bad landlord or something who was, killing somebody. We have these folk songs everywhere. So find something that people already relate to and that touches them emotionally and touches them where they already are. And then when you have enjoyed that, and it has to be enjoyable, open with a question. So which of these stories was the best story, or what was which song made you the most happy, or something like that, and then figure out why that is. And once you have people, getting involved in a conversation and they feel that they have a good time, that is when you can say, okay, so let's do this again. If you want to hear more, let's have a study circle on this poet and why he or she wrote like that. I bet you have some people who fought the Soviets at some point, or heroes in your history. And you have to connect with people where they are. And that is it. I mean, and so that changes from group to group, where people are. And with regards to young people, I mean, we still have to figure that out for ourselves here as well. But there are a lot of young people who are worried about the climate, for instance, and follow Greta Thunberg. And so part of reaching them would be, so what are the biggest hopes and fears you have for the next 5 or 10 years, or what are the dreams that you have for your life, and what are the obstacles that you see to that from old people like myself, and open for that discussion and be willing to hear their answers and questions. And the right way to do that, we're in a process of finding that out themselves, where we don't have, I mean, because we have the folk high schools in Denmark, and so they already have the dedicated young people who pay to be there for 5 months. So they don't have that problem. But then there are all the young people who did not pay to be at one of those schools for 5 months, and that is 90% of the young people. But how do we reach them, and the young people who, as you said, want to be on TikTok and do cat videos and dance videos? That may not be where we should start. But there's also, I mean, there are the people who are the so-called low-hanging fruits that you can reach more easily, and who are actually looking for something, and who might also just be looking for a place to meet other people and hang out with other people and talk about something meaningful, and try to figure out, so what would that be like? I see Tatevik.
Yeah, thanks a lot for all the great questions and comprehensive answers. I'm on my mobile right now, and I would like to render Hadan's question here. Probably it would be great, besides the theoretical part of vertical and horizontal education, to have some insight into what is Bildung by itself, how it functions, like an example from Bildung that you have, and also some recommendations of resources where we can find more information, read, and expand our knowledge. Thanks.
Yeah, so we are working on creating that, because we know exactly what it is you're asking for, and we don't have it yet. And it's we're actually trying to bring some people together here in Denmark, in order to, I mean, the people who work with this, and to get them to come up with their best tricks of the trade, so that we can share them globally. And so what I would like to ask of you would be that you get together, or some of you get together, and write 1 page about what is it that you're looking for, because we would like to find it. And we would like to find the people here who have experience with it, and who can help us develop this, create a toolbox where you don't have to establish a school for it, but where you can do programs that can fit into, could be existing school systems, can be workplaces, can be study circles online and so forth, and that are easy to explain to people or to teach other people to host, because we really need this, and we need it as well. And we're talking to some people in Kiev right now who want to, develop a Scandinavian, Ukrainian collaboration around this so that they can get it too. And right now I'm talking to both some people in Brazil and the United States who are asking as well. So, I wish I could give you something, but we're working on it. And we really realized that there is a need for this. So yeah, let's keep the conversation going. And I bet that in a year we'll have a package. It's going to feel like a long year, I know, but but we will. We would love for you to ask us that, and put your names under it, because then we have a much better case when we ask people here and say there are all these nice people in Armenia who really want to know this.
So you want a one-pager, like a wish list?
Yeah, the more specific you can be, the better. But also,
Okay.
if it's just anything, yeah, or half a page or 2 pages, but anything that we can show our people in the Bildung folk high schools, evening classes, this whole sort of sector, a part of the educational sector who are most focused on Bildung, and say this is what people are looking for in Armenia. That would be so cool.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So we have a task.
Yeah. No, really, because if you have that to specify your needs and what you're looking for, I bet other people are looking for it as well. And at the European Bildung Network, we're planning the European Bildung Day on May 8th and 9th, which will be online, but it will be a combination of online and local events. So just briefly, we'll start on Saturday afternoon, that's May 8th, with a pan-European Zoom conference with some keynote presentations. Then Saturday afternoon, we encourage local organizers to host local Bildung events, and it can be conversations like this. It can be, listing your frustrations, or bringing in more new people and telling them about Bildung, or whatever it is that you would like to do under the umbrella of Bildung, and how do we do it. And then on Sunday, and whether you do it online or in real life is fine with us. The advantage will be that you can do it in your own language. And then on Sunday, we will have an online conference for people from around Europe and the organizers. And then we'll share what people came up with during the local events on Saturday. And we're in the process of setting up the website for it. And I was just talking to you, Julia, about whether you can sign up for the network as a group or as individuals. It will, of course, help us tremendously if you sign up as individuals. It's €9 to become a member. If you're generous, it's 19 euros. Everybody works as volunteers, so it's not like we get a salary out of this. And there will be a fee for participating as an individual at the European Bildung Day. But the local events, you get to decide how that's going to work. If you want to, we're probably going to offer a digital platform. And if people are going to participate on that, we'll have to find out what the participation fee is going to be for everybody. Also, if people are not members, we'll have to figure out the technicalities. But if you host something live in Yerevan, it's all up to you if people are going to pay or not, or what the price is going to be. We're just going to figure out how to integrate it into the overall program. So that'd be fun if you would like to participate and contribute.
Wow, great! Thank you very much. If we have time, or it's too long, or
No, we can do. Well, let's go until 30. So what is that, 8:30 at your place now? It's
If
20, yeah, it's 20 after 8 at,
okay.
it's 20 after 5 here. So
Anybody?
let's go on for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
If you have any questions or comments or suggestions or.
Anybody else? If not, I have some.
Tatevik, this.
Tatevik? Tatevik, you wish?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Julia can go ahead. I mean, if there are some people who haven't spoken, they can go ahead. If there is anyone.
I just wonder, we told about free and moral person, and we told about more about moral, and it's very right about literature and meetings and conversation. It feels like this is the thing, but about freedom. And I don't know if it's question or just my thoughts and and also it's connected to what Artyom says about Soviet people, because okay, moral maybe, but not free. And I think about something about process, about long time process, like from the beginning of 20th century, maybe from beginning of modernist period and all this industrialization, and people in different ways, not only in Soviet Union, in different ways, people lost their individuality. They become part of machine and they become part of collective, and it was too much. And after this, after World War, Second War, it feels like the world was so stressed after what happened in this war, and where we got because of the loss of individuality, and then we become too much, like we deconstruct everything, and then become neoliberalism came, and we was become atomized societies, and we are not really free. We are not really free because we are become in too much individual. We are not free also. So now we can, or maybe I believe, and I want to believe, we can find balance in also Bildung system, and use maybe other skills, other philosophic wisdom, or but part of me think maybe it's only revolution. Only revolution can make us free, but I don't really want, because we saw too much revolutions, and it also wasn't not very nice. I don't know if it's question, or if you believe without revolution we can set us free and moral, and find balance between individuality and society. And
yeah, I don't believe in revolution the way that people tend to think of it, because the way that I see it, all that you get from a revolution is that you break down some infrastructure. And it can be, physical infrastructure, it can be political infrastructure, it can be the moral infrastructure and the cultural infrastructure, which is not generally not a good idea. But what is a good idea is to expand people's understanding of the world, and then have them stop doing what doesn't make sense anymore. And so if you can, expand that horizontal knowledge, and you can deepen the emotional roots, and get people to take responsibility for more things. And taking responsibility can be, cleaning your neighborhood. or setting up a, if you are hosting evening classes, take turns being the babysitter on that evening, and do something for the kids when you have the parents for a study circle. Or maybe it's the, we'll make sure that everybody gets dinner when they join a study circle, because, and then somebody takes responsibility for cooking. And if you do that and bring people together and have conversations, not about yourself, but about something third that you're sharing, that is when you can start making changes, and then you can make local changes, and you can start talking about, okay, so now 5 of us live in this neighborhood where we miss, it would be great if we could create, I don't know, a local library, private little thing, or book club, or urban gardening, or whatever, or soup night every other Tuesday of the week, or whatever. So once you get started creating things like that and self-organizing, then you can start expanding the understanding of society. And I think if it isn't meaningful and fun and enriching when people go there, it won't happen. So you have to come up with something where you enjoy being there yourselves, and you have to enjoy sharing it, and it, it can be everybody brings cake, or you have to create that social environment around it. And one of the things that I've learned from trying to start, I actually tried to start what we now have with Nordic Bildung, and we also have a sort of popular branch that was we're thinking, hey, things are starting up, and then COVID came, so we've been shut down for a year, and we haven't been able to transfer it to something online. But what I've learned from trying to start up something like this 3 times is that it's really crucial that you find a place and a time where you can that becomes regular. If you have a name of the organization or the group, and you have a place that you meet regularly, and you do it every other Tuesday, or every first Wednesday of the month, or every Sunday, or whatever it is, but it has to be there regularly so that people can plan according to it. And so that they know that if I want to experience something like this again, it is exactly 1 week from now, or exactly 1 month from now, or whatever. So do something that you can somehow repeat with a different topic, or a different, guest speaker, or a different, poetry, or different songs, or whatever it is. But where it becomes recurring, because then you can build momentum, and you have to do that in order for it to lift off. And it also eases your planning, because then you don't have to, go out and find a new place all the time. But it can be a problem finding the right place. But that would be my advice.
Thank you very much, and it's very nice to know. It's made us more confidence, maybe, because this is exactly what we start to do, and it's work. My opinion, it's work amazing. It's not hundreds of people yet, but even 10, 15, 20 people who came to our meetings, it's amazing.
So wonderful. And make sure that you have some sort of structure also that frames it. Start by reading.
This is the revolution.
This is the revolution, exactly. Start by reading a poem, or singing a song, or reading something else that it's live. Somebody says it or reads it because it's meaningful to them. They care about it, and then do whatever it is that you're doing, and make sure that when you close this thing before you leave, you have some other little, call it ritual. So that we know when this begins, we know when this ends, and 2 weeks from now we'll do the exact same thing but with different content. And then, because then it also becomes easier to say, and next time everybody brings a friend. Because then you can actually, explain to your friends what it is that you're what it is you're doing. Which also makes it more fun to try to bring people in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great fun. I'd be happy to do it again later, and I look forward to getting a page from you with all your frustrations and questions. That would be really great.
I don't know
Yes.
if I have time to ask one,
Yes,
just one more,
you
since we
do.
got into this topic. And
Yep.
we were talking about a revolution, and it seems like we understand this. I mean, am I really taking too much of your time?
No, it's okay. Good.
So we were talking since we were talking about revolution, it just came to me that we understand this change only in the frame of repressive governments, and then the ability to speak your truth out.
There's the power, yeah.
But then there are also other situations, like one in Armenia, when you don't have repression of the authorities, but rather you have historical wounds, say, that prevents the society from being tolerant to this typical, let's say, iconoclast who will question certain things. Like when you have, let's say, a war, say recently, in like only a few months back, and then if you question what you have a society with people who have lost their brothers there, and when you question whether this was meaningful or something, then you get this intolerance from the society, but it doesn't come from the, well, let's put this this way. Intolerance always comes from a place of fear or pain, and this is this pain that's causing them to be intolerant. So this is not the regime. Sometimes this is not a regime we're talking about, and it's very interesting to know whether there are ways to cope with this when the thing actually holding you back is the society itself. Not the structure of the government where you have to, put down via revolution or something, but just the wounds that are preventing from the development and seeing things from the other perspective. It's very interesting to know whether this is as well discussed as well, because, Soviet regime is one thing, right? Soviet regime was the repressing totalitarian thing that wouldn't allow the thought to be developed. But here again, we have all the opportunities, but still something is holding us back, which is painful. And it's very interesting to know whether, as a form of art, let's say, whether a form of art is really creating some good there because it's changing things, or is it actually bringing more pain there because it's again touching strings that are not to be touched perhaps yet. Or this is also very interesting question to address, I think. And if you have any views.
I mean, this is of course a situation that I have not been in, but I would then look towards South Africa and their truth and reconciliation process after the apartheid, and whether some of those processes can be reinvented, and whether you can. So I don't know the exact conflicts in Armenia and where people's pain is exactly. I'll have to get to know you and your country better, but I absolutely think that these conversations, and for people, this is what I think the question is: can people? There's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of loss, and there's a lot of, I guess, distrust and sort of conflicts that could open up very easily if people are not careful. If somebody says the wrong word in the wrong place, things can spin out of control really quickly. So one of the things that I would think that you could work on is figuring out how can you create a set of rules for people to share how they feel. And among those rules, for instance, can be that you don't address what other people did, but how you felt when something happened, or that in the group. I mean, you can address what somebody did, but it has to be somebody outside the group. It has to be something historically. What went wrong, and what happened inside me when that happened, and the willingness to listen to other people's stories would be one of the rules to participate in this conversation. But I mean, so here we go into a very specific healing process in a society that is hurting, and that is I mean, it definitely relates to Bildung, but it's fundamentally a different question. But I can absolutely see that it's relevant to you and your group and to your society. And the question is, I bet that there are people who have worked with this from a trauma perspective. And this is way out of my, field of knowledge and competence. But I bet that you could set up something that would work in that way, and that you could then somehow connect to Bildung. But to me, it's a fundamentally different question, because now you're trying to heal actually trauma from war.
But the thing is that this is what's preventing us from the development, from any kind of development, actually, not just vertical, but also horizontal in this case, because there's lots of information that cannot be shared just because it's hurtful.
Right. So I would say that is a healing process that has to, and I would love to include this in our work, but we'll have to find some people who know about this specifically, because here you need some people who have worked with that kind of. I mean, there are group processes for this. I know that, but I don't know what they're called. I don't know who does it. But you can definitely find programs online or people who've worked with that. I would say, yes, that is a barrier in your culture and in your society. It is also, I was actually just watching a movie or a documentary this afternoon about Dresden. And so the way that Dresden was bombed at the end of the Second World War was, traumatizing to whoever survived the bombing in Dresden. And then it became part of the, East Germany, and the city was all ruins. And then they built all this really horrible, concrete high rises, and the inner city of Dresden just remained almost like an open wound. They removed the ruins, but it was just, grass. And there was actually sheep downtown Dresden in the 1950s because it was just grass field, and there was, East Germany didn't have any money and so forth. So anyway, and now the right-wing party Alternative für Deutschland is really, really strong in this part of Germany. And what I realized, or what I saw in that documentary, I don't think that was the point they were making, the people who made the documentary, but what I saw there was, Germans whose families had been in Dresden since before the war. And of course, some of them were fighting on the side of the Nazis during the Second World War, but the people who live there today did not. And their parents and grandparents who, at least the grandparents, died in the bombings, their pain and belonging has not been recognized because they happen to be on the wrong side of history. And so that sense of recognition from the rest of the German society, or from the rest of us, and saying, yes, you suffered too, would be healing to those people. But and so until somebody, and oh yeah, there was a conflict because then there was a Syrian artist who had made this great, or not huge, great necessarily, but huge artwork in the, like one of the central places in the, now they restored the city, blah, blah, blah. And so the alternative for Germany were offended and angry because the Syrian artist had, gotten resources for a piece of art sympathizing with the Syrian refugees, but they could not get money for some artwork commemorating the victims of the bombing of Dresden in 1945. And I totally understand their emotions, and they deserve a recognition of their pain. It doesn't mean that they were on the right side of history, but their side of that history suffered as well. And I think that the recognition of people's pain is not the same as saying that the side that you were fighting on was doing the right thing. And some of these people are the children of the people who were doing the wrong thing, but they still live in pain. And so we need to be much better at talking about this and recognizing people's pain and not just dismissing them because they happen to be on the other side. And I think that was what was so amazing about South Africa after the apartheid, was that they actually managed to create a process where people who had, literally were facing people who had killed their relatives, and they just had to somehow deal with that. And we're really bad at that, and for good reason, because it's painful. And if, so part of a healing process is figuring out how to do this. And South Africa is remarkable in that respect.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time as well. And I hope that we can continue the conversation, and that I'll see you on European Bildung Day.
Likewise.
Great meeting you.
Thank you, Len.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
very much. See you.
Thank you so much.
See you soon. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.